I request to play ICI motto.
य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति य एष सुप्तेषु जागृति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्मिमाणः निर्मिमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
Good afternoon, everyone. To one and all present over here, I, Divya Jain, Managing Committee Member of Ahmedabad branch of Vikasa, welcomes you all in today's Swadhyay session. I would like to thank and I would like to welcome CA Anil Shah sir, CA Harit Dhariwal sir, and CA Anjali ma'am, Vishan sir for always guiding us and for always supporting us and to take up this opportunity and uh, in bringing such wonderful series in to for all of us. I request Anil Shah sir to give keynote address.
Thank you, Divya, for giving a wonderful start to today's session of, we can say, Swadhyay. And truly, if I tell to all the student friends present here, then it is Sunday for all of you. But for me and for the team Vikasa, it's a super student Sunday. If I just on a friendly note share with you that me and right now the whole team Vikasa is presently at branch, right? And in the morning, since 5:30, they are active on toes to manage the, you can say, the event of cycling. So in the morning, we had a cycling event. We got very good response. We did a cycling of nearly 10 to 15 kilometers. Then it ended at 9:30. At 10, we had the series, the ICDS and text audit series going on. So we had a very lucid discussion on that. And the learned speaker, CA Jignesh, who is also going to chair today's session as a mentor for the session. Then at 10:30, the whole team Vikasa went to Red Cross to just see to out that how the plasma donation goes on. And the whole volunteer team discussed with Red Cross technical team so that the campaign can go in a better manner. So it went on. And then you can say from 1 to 3, there was a felicitation ceremony of cricket, box cricket. There was a felicitation ceremony of chess. And yes, it ended. And now the last session we are having right now of Vikasa, that is of this Swadhyay. So kudos to team Vikasa for, and I can say that just once they start, they'll be having their lunch. Since morning, they were on toes. So very sincere effort by whole team Vikasa to have this super successful Sunday devoted for the betterment and upliftment, overall upliftment and growth of students at large. So would not take much of the time, but would again congratulate to Sanya for again taking this opportunity to address on a very critical aspect. And I can say mentored by two mentors, right? One is Jignesh Bhai and another is also Harit Dhariwal sir, who is constantly there at office to mentor you. So you're lucky enough to have two mentors with you. So I'm sure that you are going to deliberate in a best manner and students who are joining this will take the best benefit of this. And I would like to tell you that though right now we are having like 20-25 volunteers, but you deliver in such a manner because we are going to publish all this by editing it on YouTube also so that students can take better, more benefit of the same. So with these words, I would again hand over the charge to Divya. Thank you. And again, congratulate Sanya. And again, thank you, Jignesh Bhai, for joining again on this Sunday for the betterment of students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words. I request Harit sir to address all the students.
Good evening, everyone. And I think, Fenil, the way you briefed entire committee and everyone, I think it was a great Sunday for all of us. And thank you for leading from the front. You have been guiding force, guiding all of us and the entire team, Vikasa. So thanks a lot for that. Coming to Swadhyaya, I think Swadhyaya is something which is very close to our hearts. I think there's a simple reason that when we see students performing and presenting and being ably guided by mentors like Jignesh Bhai and the earlier mentors also, it feels so good. That they take this opportunity of taking sessions for their own fellow students. Now, I just want to tell you one thing that why I feel Swadhyaya, or for that matter any other platform like this is important. Because they say that you will never get a second chance to create a first impression, right? And when after becoming a chartered accountant, you'll go out in this ruthless world. You have to be all prepared. And platforms like Swadhyay and other, so many events that are lined up. This gives you an opportunity to explore yourself, give you the best chance to try different avenues. And hence, I congratulate all the students who have been taking it. And week after week after week, we are seeing so many good speakers coming out and giving very good presentations. And thanks to Jignesh Bhai, I think all the mentors, we should not forget it's a Sunday for all of us. And in spite of being busy throughout the entire week, Jignesh Bhai spared 4 hours for us today, 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. So thank you, Jignesh Bhai. It's a pleasure to have you on a Sunday evening as well. So, and one request to all the students, please take this as an opportunity. Please enroll yourself. I have already seen there are so many students lined up already for the next few weeks. So in case you want to take a sessions, please enroll with Divya and the entire team Vikasa. They can help you with the slots, so that you can take this opportunity to improve yourself. Once again, and congratulations to Sanya for taking this opportunity, and wishing you all the best. And we look forward to your session. So with this, wishing all of you a very happy learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request Shivam Gaur to introduce our today's mentor.
Thank you, Divya. Good evening to all. It is my great opportunity to welcome CA Jignesh Parikh sir, who is the mentor for today. CA Jignesh Parikh sir is a fellow member of ICI. He is a partner of Patel and Jisalpara Chartered Accountants, Ahmedabad, since January 2013. He has an experience of over 11 years in the field of statutory audits of corporate and non-corporate clients, including bank audits. Apart from this, his main areas of focus are management consultancy, financial due diligence, representation before income tax authorities, up to income tax appellate tribunal, designing SOP and KRA, and getting the same implemented. He has delivered lectures on various topics of income tax, including ICDS and accounting standards at various branches of ICI, study circles, and Tax Practitioners Association. He has also worked as chief compiler for the compilation of ICDS issued by the Jamnagar branch of WIRC of ICI during December 16. He has also contributed articles to journals published for members for the financial year 2016-17 and financial year 19-20. The articles written by him were adjudicated as the best article under direct tax category. He has been appointed as a co-opted member of Direct Tax Committee of Ahmedabad branch of WRC of financial year 17-18 and 2021. In September 20, he has received Certificate of Appreciation from Indian Corporate Law Service Academy, Government of India for compilation of reading material on the subject of income tax. We are really glad to have you, sir, on this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shivam. Our speaker for today is a CA final student who is pursuing CA final year of her articleship from Ashok Dhariwal and Company, and I would like to welcome Ms. Sanya Jagnani.
Before beginning my session, I would like to thank CA Finance Shah sir CA Harit Dharwal sir, the entire Vikasa committee, as well as my mentor CA Jignesh Parekh sir for today. Especially CA Harit Dharwal sir for encouraging me to take up this opportunity, and my mentor for mentoring me at all aspects. So I'll begin my session. So my topic for today is going to be Section 44AB of the Income Tax Act, discussion on the tax audit clauses and the latest income tax circulars. To begin with, the first very basic question is, what is tax audit? So tax audit was introduced by the Finance Act 1984 and was applicable with effect from 1st April 1985. Now, if you read the memorandum explaining the bill 1984, it stated that the compulsory audit is intended to ensure proper maintenance of books of accounts and other records in order to reflect the true income of the taxpayers and to facilitate the administration of tax laws by proper presentation of accounts before the tax authority. This would save the time of the assessing officers considerably in carrying out the verification. So in a country like India, where there's a large population, it would not have been possible for the assessing officer to verify each and every income tax return that has been filed. Accordingly, the responsibility of ensuring that the income of the assessee has been computed in accordance with the provisions of this act was entrusted upon chartered accountants, and that is why tax audit was brought into force. Now, beginning with my main section, that is section 44AB. So section 44AB can basically be bifurcated into two, where the assessee is carrying on business or the assessee is carrying on profession. Beginning with the first clause of the section, which is in case the assessee is carrying on business, and in that case, if his total sales, turnover or gross receipts during that year exceeds rupees 1 crore, he shall be liable for tax audit, which shall be duly signed by an accountant and submitted within the specified date. Now, Finance Act 20 provided a proviso to this clause, which stated that in case the assessee is carrying on business, the limit of 1 crore shall be substituted to 5 crore if the following two conditions are satisfied. So the first condition was that the cash receipts of the assessee shall not exceed 5% of the total receipts, as well as the cash payments of the assessee shall not exceed 5% of the total payments. Now, in this case, total payments and total receipts shall be inclusive of all the receipts, whether in the nature of cash or whether in the nature of revenue or capital. So, for example, if I've sold a machine during the year, the proceeds of the sale of the machine will be included in my total receipts. Similarly, if I've made a repayment of a loan during the year, that repayment would be included in my total payments. Moving on, this is an example for you to answer if the assessee is satisfying the conditions of the proviso to clause A. You can put in your answers in the chat box. Now, in case if you would have calculated the same, the cash receipts of the assessee does not exceed 5% of the total receipts. So it is fulfilling the first condition, that is less than 5% of the total receipts. However, if you move on to the payment side, the cash payments exceed 5% of the total payments. And so the second condition of the proviso is not fulfilled. In this case, when both of these conditions are not fulfilled, the assessee will not be able to claim the benefit of the proviso inserted, and his limit for tax audit would remain to 1 crore and not 5 crore. Moving on to the next clause of section 44AB, that is in case of the assessee is carrying on profession. So here, assessee carrying on the specified professions mentioned under section 44A of the Act are referred, and if his gross receipts exceed rupees 50 lakhs, he shall be liable for tax audit. Moving to the next clause is again where the assessee is carrying on the business which can be assessed under the presumptive taxation of section 44AE or section 44BB or section 44BBB, and he has claimed income less than the profits of gains described under the aforesaid section. So section 44AE is for assessees carrying on the business of flying, hiring or leasing of goods carriage, where section 44BB is for non-residents carrying on the business of exploration of mineral oils, and section 44BBB is for a foreign company engaged in the business of civil construction. So in any of the three cases, in any of the three sections where the assessee claims his dividend or his income less than the amount prescribed under this aforesaid section, he shall be liable to get his books of accounts audited by an accountant under section 44AB. Moving to the next clause, that is again in the case of an assessee carrying on profession. If the assessee opts for presumptive taxation under section 44ADA of the Act, but has claimed income below the profits or gains prescribed under this section. Now 44ADA again is applicable to the profession specified under section 44AA of the Act. And so section 44AA of the Act says that where the assessee has gross receipts less than 50 lakhs from the profession, the assessee shall at least claim 50% of such receipts as his income. And in case the assessee claims any amount less than 50% of such receipts and his income exceeds the maximum amount of income not chargeable to tax, he shall get his books of accounts audited. Now, as we are discussing the liability of a professional to get his books of accounts audited, I would like to ask a question that in case if a chartered accountant has his gross receipts as rupees 49 lakhs during the previous year, along with that he receives 3 lakh rupees from his client as an amount that the chartered accountant has paid for the GST liability of the client. Will the chartered accountant be liable for tax audit? Now, in this case, it is a case of diversion of income by overriding title. So, in this case, the client had only provided 3 lakh rupees to the assessee on account of making a payment for him of a tax liability, and so the 3 lakh should not be included in his as a part of his gross receipts, and accordingly, he shall not be liable for tax audit. Moving on to the next clause, that is clause E, which is in case the assessee falls within the ambit of subsection 4 of 44AD, he shall be liable for tax audit. I will now discuss section 44AD in detail. So section 44AD is for business who wants to compute his income on presumptive basis. So section 44AD overrides all the sections between section 28 to 43C. And in case of an eligible assessee who is engaged in the eligible business, a sum of 8% of the total turnover of the gross or the gross of the total turnover or gross profits, or 6% of the total turnover or gross profit in case such amount has been received other than by way of cash, must be claimed. So this is the minimum limit that the assessee shall claim at least 8% or 6% of his total turnover. Moving to the next subsection, which states that it would have been deemed to be understood that any deduction allowable under section 30 to 38 would already have been given effect. Similarly, in case of any fixed asset, the written down value would also be considered as if the assessee has claimed depreciation for the previous year. Coming to the main section, subsection, that is subsection 4. Now, subsection 4 states that where an assessee declares his profit for any previous year in accordance with subsection 1, that is, he declares at least 6% or 8% of his total turnover, as the case may be. For the next 5 assessment year relevant to that previous year, he shall only declare income in accordance with subsection 1. However, during these 5 years, in any year, if he does not declare income in accordance with subsection 1, the assessee will no longer be liable to claim the benefit of this section for the next 5 years. So, for example, if in FY 18-19, I have shown my income in accordance with subsection 1, that is 8% or 6% of my gross receipts. However, in the third year, instead of showing 6% or 8%, I've shown any amount less than that. So then from that third year, I would compulsory be liable to get my books of accounts audited under section 44AB, as well as for the next 5 years, I will not be able to claim the benefit of showing income as 8% or 6% on presumptive basis under section 44A. This clause is only applicable in case the income of the assessee exceeds the maximum amount of income which is not chargeable to tax. This section is not applicable in case of a person carrying on the specified professions, or in case the assessee has any income in the nature of commission or brokerage, or the assessee is engaged in the business of agency. Moving on, for the purpose of this section, an eligible assessee would mean any individual HUF partnership firm, however, it would not include any LLP, and who has not claimed deduction under section 10A, 10AA, 10B or 10BA, or deductions under any provisions of chapter 6A. Also, for the purpose of this section, eligible business would mean a business other than the business specified in section 44AE, that is the business of plying or hiring or leasing of goods carriage. Also, eligible business would mean where the turnover or the gross receipts or the sales from that business does not exceed 2 crore rupees. Next is the exemption that is given to certain assessees from section 44AB. So that is section 44B, where there is income of shipping business in case of non-residents. 44BBA, profits and gains of business of operations of aircrafts in case of non-residents, where gross receipts exceed 25 lakhs, and where the assessee is claiming his income under subsection 1 of section 44AB. Section 44AB also prescribes that in case the assessee is required to get his books of account audited under any other act, so for example, in case of companies under Companies Act, it shall be sufficient for such an assessee to get his audit complete before the specified due date, and to annex such audit report along with his form 3CA and 3CD. Now, for the purpose of this section, accountant shall mean a chartered accountant in practice, and the specified date would mean 1 month prior to the date of furnishing of return under section 139(1). So in the current scenario, since the due date of furnishing a return under section 39(1) is 30th November, the last date for furnishing tax audit report would be 31st October. Now this is just a diagram showing that in case the assessee has income below 1 crore, he does not have to worry. However, if he has income anywhere between 1 crore to 5 crore, he needs to see the interplay of all these sections, aforesaid sections. And similarly, in case he has an income above 5 crore, he would invariably be liable for tax audit. Now, this is a question where Mr. A started manufacturing business and his turnover for the first year was rupees 175 lakhs, and he declared income of rupees 9.5 lakh. Now, in this case, will tax audit be applicable to Mr. A? In this case, the tax audit would be applicable, as you could have already seen the answer, but if you could specify the reason in the chat box as well. Yeah, so in this case, tax audit would be applicable, not because, also because firstly, he's claiming profit less than 8% or 6% of his gross turnover. So in that case, the assessee would not go under section 44 AD. However, since his income, his turnover exceeds 1 crore rupees, he shall be liable for tax audit under clause A of the Act. Now the next question would be, would your answer change if his turnover was rupees 70 lakhs and he declared his income of rupees 3.5 lakhs? Now, as most of you have correctly answered the question, in this case, tax audit won't be liable even if he claims profit below 6% or 8%, because section 44 AB gives reference to subsection 4 of the 44 AD. In this case, the assessee has not fallen within subsection 4 of 44 AD, and so he won't be liable for tax audit. Now the next question is, Mr. C is engaged in the business of manufacturing and has a turnover of rupees 120 lakhs and declares income of rupees 9.6 lakhs for AY 1780. In this case, will he be liable for tax audit? So in this case, as the assessee is claiming 8% of his turnover as his income, he would not be liable for tax audit and he would go for section 44 AD. Continuing the same example, if in AY 1819 his turnover is still rupees 120 lakhs and he has declared income of rupees 6 lakhs, now will he be liable for tax audit? So as most of you have again correctly answered, in this case, he will be liable for tax audit. But the continuing question to the above scenario is that in case in 1920s turnover exceeds rupees 100 and his turnover is rupees 110 lakhs and he wants to declare 6% or 8% as an income, will he be liable to claim the benefit? Will he be able to claim the benefit under section 44 AD? So yeah, most of you are again correct. In this case, he won't be liable or he won't be able to claim the benefit of section 44 AD because he's covered under subsection 4 of 44 AD. As in the first year, he took the option of claiming his income under section 44 AD. So ideally, he should have continued to do the same for the next 5 assessment years. But in the second year itself, he claimed his income less than the prescribed amount. And so for the next 5 years, he will compulsorily be liable to get his books audited under section 44 AD. Now the next question is where the assessee carries on both business and profession. In this case, if his gross receipts of profession are rupees 52 lakhs, as well as his sales turnover or gross receipts of business is rupees 105 lakhs, will he now be required to get his books of accounts audited under section 44 AB? So in this case, he will be required to get his books of accounts audited because his gross receipts from profession exceed 52 lakh rupees. As well as in case of business, also his turnover is exceeding 1 crore rupees. Now the second scenario in this case is if the gross receipts of profession is rupees 21 lakhs, however, the turnover from business is only rupees 86 lakhs. Now in this case, will he be liable for tax audit? Yeah, so as most of you have answered that irrespective, if I don't consider the profit impact, he won't be liable for tax audit under section 44 AV. This has been specifically specified in para 5 of the guidance note that has been issued by ICI. Also, while we are doing tax audit, it would be very important for us to go through the entire guidance note issued by ICI as it provides various clarifications. Now, before I move on to the main tax audit report, this is just a snapshot of how the procedure goes. So once the assessee is liable to get his books of accounts audited under section 44 AB, Rule 6G will prescribe the forms for report under section 44 AB. Now there'll be two forms that need to be given. So either the assessee will give 3CA plus 3CD or 3CB plus 3CD. Also, if the assessee does not furnish his tax audit report before the specified date, he would be liable for a penalty of 0.5% of the turnover or 1,50,000, whichever is lower. So what is Form 3CA? So Form 3CA is to be filed by an assessee who is required to get his books of accounts audited under any other act. So as stated earlier, for example, in case of Companies Act or LLP Act or any other act for that matter, here the auditor would only be required to comment on the true and correctness of the particulars furnished by the assessee in his Form 3CD, and as well as he would be required to annex his financial statements along with this report. Now, Form 3CB is required in any other case. In any other case where the assessee is not required to get his books of accounts audited under any other act, In this case, the auditor would also be required, that is the tax auditor would also be required to comment on the true and correct view of the financial statements that have been annexed, along with his comment on the particulars furnished in Form 3CD. Form 3CD is just a statement of the particulars that need to be furnished along with Form 3CA and 3CA and 3CB. Now, wherever there is an audit, the auditor shall invariably comply with the essays while conducting the audit. Accordingly, in this case also, the auditor is required to follow SA 700, that is forming an opinion. So in this case, the auditor is required to give his observations or remarks in Form 3CA or 3CB. Here also the particulars to be furnished in Form 3CD are to be provided, are provided by the assessee, and the auditor just gives his comment on whether the same are true and correct or not. So if we move to Form 3CA, the first clause of 3CA requires that the auditor reports who was the statutory auditor of the assessee, along with the act under which the audit was conducted, and also annex along his financial statements. Now in this case, clause 3 is particularly important because it states that in our opinion and to the best of our information and according to the examination of books of accounts, including other relevant documents and explanation given to us, the particulars given in the said Form 3CD are true and correct. So here is where the auditor is required to give his observation or qualifications, if in case he has any. Similarly, in Form 3CB, in clause 5, the auditor is required to give his qualifications or observations. Now, the part that is highlighted in the box in red is where the auditor is required to comment on the correctness and the trueness of the profit and loss or the income statement or the balance sheet that has been annexed along with. Here are a few situations where the auditor may give qualification. So firstly, if the auditor has not been able to obtain documents necessary to verify the reportable transactions, or stock records have not been maintained, or it is not possible for the auditor to verify personal natures, expense of personal natures, or in case the assessee has any exempted income under Section 14A, the expense related to such income cannot be ascertained. Similarly, prior period expenses cannot be ascertainable, or the GP ratio cannot be ascertained, or for that matter, even if the TDS returns of the assessee could not be verified with the books of accounts, the auditor may give his qualifications or remark in clause 3 or 5 of the Form 3CA or 3CB. Moving to Form 3CD, Form 3CD is divided into two parts. Part A, which contains clause from 1 to 8, and Part B, which contains clause from 9 to 44. Moving on, Part A is the basic information of the assessee, so the name, address, permanent account number, status, previous year, assessment year, and clause 8 requires the assessee to select under which clause is he liable for getting his books audited under Section 44A. Here, an important clause is clause number 4, which requires to report whether the assessee is liable to pay indirect tax, for example, GST, and if in case he is liable, he shall give his GSTN number. Now, in this case, if the assessee is liable to pay indirect tax, however, he has not obtained the registration and is not paying the indirect tax, will the auditor be required to give his qualifications or remarks in Form 3CA or 3CB? Yeah, so it would be prudent for the auditor to give his qualifications or remarks in his Form 3CA or 3CB. Now, a notification was issued on 2nd October, which brought certain changes to the Form 3CD. So one of the change was an additional clause 8A, which requires the assessee to ascertain whether the assessee has opted for taxation under section 115BA, BAA or BAB. So all these clauses, all these sections are only applicable in case of a domestic company, and section 115BAA and BAB were only brought in by the Ordinance Act 2019. So in case the assessee has opted for this alternative tax regime, he shall select under which section has he opted for the same. Moving to clause 9, A and B. So 9A and B is only for firms, partnership firms, LLPs, association of persons, or a body of individuals, where they're required to indicate the name of their partners or members along with their profit sharing ratios. Now, in this case, the auditor must obtain the partnership deeds or the or the trust deeds or LLP deeds to ensure that the correct profit sharing ratios have been reported, as well as if there has been any change in the same shall also be disclosed, shall also be reported in clause B. Moving to the next clause, which requires to furnish the details of all the business or professions carried on by the assessee. So the nature of each and every business that has been carried on or profession that has been carried on by the assessee needs to be given. Also, in case of change, the details of change shall be given. So in this case, only a change that is permanent in nature must be reported. Any temporary suspension of a business line may not be reported. Also, the auditor can verify the same from the MOA in case of a company, or the partnership deed, or any other deed for that matter, or even the financial statements that have been annexed. Moving to the next clause, that is 11A. 11A is whether books of accounts are prescribed under section 44AA. If yes, list of books so prescribed. So in this case, reporting is only required if books of accounts are maintained under Rule 6F. Now, Rule 6F is only applicable in case of profession. That too, if the gross receipt from profession exceed 1,50,000 in any of the preceding 3 previous years. So this clause will not be applicable in case of businesses. Rule 6F also prescribes that the books of accounts must be maintained for at least 6 years from the end of the relevant AY. Clause B is list of books of accounts maintained and the address at which such books of accounts have been kept. Also, in this case, the assessee, in this case, the auditor must obtain a list of all the books of accounts that have been maintained, along with the address at which these books of accounts have been maintained. In a current scenario where most of the books of accounts are maintained in a computerized system, that is through Tally or SAP or any other accounting software, you should mention the books of accounts generated by such computer system. And if books are not kept at one particular location, details of all the locations must be given. Clause C is the list of books of accounts, and the nature of relevant documents that have been examined by the auditor needs to be given. Clause B is whether the profit or loss account includes any profits or gains assessable on presumptive basis. So if, for example, we take the assessee has income from section 44AE, then in that case, he would be required to give the nature of the vehicle, the number of vehicles, the month of acquisition in case of vehicle is purchased during the relevant previous year, the presumptive income per month. So in case of 44AE, the presumptive income per month is rupees 7,500 if the goods carriage, if the weight of the goods carriage is less than 12 metric ton. However, it is rupees 1,000 if the weight of the goods carriage exceed 12 metric ton, and it is 1,000 per metric ton of the goods. So then the assessee is required to give details of any such presumptive income that is inclusive in his profits. It will also be pertinent to note that while deciding whether the assessee is required to liable for tax audit or not, any income that has been assessed on presumptive basis shall not form part of the turnover of the assessee. Now, in this case, a scenario might be where the assessee has more than one business, including business assessed on presumptive basis, and the assessee has not maintained books of accounts for the business assessed on presumptive basis, but the entire amount of income is credited to P&L, that is from presumptive business as well as from the normal business. So in this case, will the auditor be required to qualify his report or give his remarks in Form 3CB of his report? So in this case, since the auditor will be unable to satisfy himself about the correctness of the profit that has been claimed, he shall attach a suitable note, or he may qualify his report if in his opinion is not able to form a view on the true and correctness of the accounts that have been annexed. Moving on to the next clause, that is in case the method of accounting employed in the previous year must be furnished. So in this case, that could be cash or mercantile basis. Also, it also requires furnishing details if there has been any change in the method of accounting and its impact on profits. Similarly, clause D requires adjustments to be made in case there has been any adjustment made to the profit or loss complying with the provisions of ICDS. If the answer to that is yes, details must be given. Also, in clause 13F, disclosure as per ICDS is given. So now, where the assessee is following cash basis, firstly, he will not be liable to follow the ICDS. Secondly, ICDS are only standards for computation of income, and they are not standards for maintaining books of accounts, like in case of accounting standards. Also, there have been 10 notified ICDS, out of which only 8 require disclosures, and disclosure of those 8 needs to be given in clause F. Moving to the next clause, which is method of valuation of closing stock. So closing stock can be valued at NRV or cost, whichever is lower. Now, in case of inventory, the cost shall include the cost of purchase, along with any expenditure incurred to bring the inventory at the required location, as well as any directly attributable cost, for example, labor for conversion of raw materials into finished goods. That also needs to be included in the cost of inventory. Now, a very debatable point is that whether the inventory should be inclusive of GST or exclusive of GST. In this case, whether the inclusive method is followed or the exclusive method is followed, the impact on the gross profit is going to be nil. As it can be seen in both the cases, my gross profit does not change. It remains stagnant at rupees 200. Moving to the next clause, which is where the capital asset is converted into stock in trade. The details of description of capital asset, date of acquisition, cost, as well as the amount at which the asset is converted must be given. Here a question is that if stock in trade has been converted into capital asset, that said stock in trade would be valued at FMV, and so accordingly, the auditor must give a remark regarding to that the inventory pertaining to that capital asset has been valued at FMV. Moving to the next clause, this requires details of the amount that has not been credited to the profit and loss account. So the first in this case is the items fallen within the scope of section 28. Now section 28 is the charging section of PGBP, and therefore accordingly it is very important. So in this case, the auditor must verify each and every item to determine whether all the items falling within this scope have been credited to the P&L account, and if not, the same must be reported here. Moving to clause 16b, which is in case of performa credits, drawbacks, refunds, or duty of customs, any such amount that has been admitted by the authorities must also be disclosed. So in case there is a GST refund that has not been credited to the P&L, the details of the same need to be reported here. Now the auditor may verify whether the amount has actually been received by logging in the portal of the assessee, or by any other document that states that the refund has actually been received. The next clause is escalation clause. So this is only pertaining to where contracts are there. If any escalation claims have been accepted, the same shall be reported here. Next is any other item of income. So any other item of income that does not fall within the scope of section 28 needs to be given here, or needs to be reported here. The last is capital receipts. So now capital receipts are not required to be credited to the P&L account. However, in this case, reporting is required so that the assessing officer can determine whether such capital receipts are taxable or not. The next clause is where details need to be given in case any land or building is transferred for an amount less than the stamp duty value or the amount assessed by the state government. Moving to clause 18, which is in terms of depreciation. Now this is again a very important clause. On prima facie, any assessee can claim depreciation on an asset only if he fulfills the following two conditions, which is firstly, the asset should be wholly or partly owned by the assessee. Secondly, the asset must be used in business. So if the following two conditions are fulfilled, the assessee can claim depreciation on that asset. Now, the assets must be classified in blocks of asset. This is also very important because based on the block of asset in which the asset is classified, the rate of depreciation would be determined. Now, in case of rate of depreciation, a change that was brought in for the rate of depreciation of motor vehicle in September 2019 was that where any motor vehicle was purchased between 23rd August 2019 to 31st March 20, the rate of depreciation in case of motor car, which was earlier 15%, would now be 30%. And where the rate of depreciation was 30% for motor vehicles, lorries used in the business of running them on hire, would now be 45%. The next is the actual cost or the written down value that must be reported. In this case, the actual cost must be determined in accordance with section 43(1). In this case, one of the point of consideration would be where any asset has been purchased and the amount and the payment of the acquisition cost has been made in cash in excess of rupees 10,000, then the amount paid in cash shall not form part of my actual cost. So if I've purchased the machinery of rupees 1 lakh rupees, and out of 1 lakh rupees, I've paid rupees 30,000 in cash in one day to that person, then my actual cost for determining depreciation would only be 70,000. Similarly, where the business in the previous year has been subject to presumptive basis, the WDV to be considered for this previous year would be after giving effect to the depreciation of the previous year. Now the next is additions or deductions. In case of additions and deductions, any excise, any tax that has been claimed or allowed under central excise tax must not form part of the same. Secondly, change in rate of exchange of currency or subsidy or grant received must be given effect to. Now, in this case, the auditor would be required to verify the dates on which the asset is purchased, because in case the asset is put to use for a period of less than 182 days, only half rate of depreciation would be allowable. Now, clause E requires the total amount of depreciation that has been claimed for the previous year, and clause F, the written down value at the end of the year. Clause 19 requires reporting of the amounts admissible under these sections. So, any amount that has been that is admissible under these sections must be carefully verified by the auditor, because these sections lay down certain specified conditions that must be fulfilled to claim the benefit under these sections. So the auditor must firstly verify all whether all such conditions have been fulfilled or not. And in case the auditor feels that such conditions have not been fulfilled, the same must be reported by the auditor in clause 24 of the report, which we will see ahead. Moving to clause 20. Clause 20 is basically for any amount paid to the employee. So 20A is when any amount as business or as bonus or commission is paid to the employee for services rendered in lieu of profits or dividend. So if any amount of bonus or commission that forms part of the contract of the employee is anyway an allowable expenditure. However, if the assessee tries to avoid the liability of dividend distribution tax by shifting his the amount to be given as dividend in bonus or commission will not be an allowable expense, and so the same needs to be reported here. The next is details of any contribution that the assessee receives from employees for various funds. So in this case, section 36(1)(5)(a) states that when the assessee receives any such amount, it shall be his income under section 224(10) of the Act. But it shall be his income if the said amount of employee's contribution is not credited to the said fund before the due date. So, for example, if the assessee has employees where the assessee is making contribution to PF, the amount of employees' contribution to PF will only be allowable as expenditure if the said amount has been deposited before the due date. So, for example, if 30,000 was to be paid as employees' contribution to the PF account, and the last date of payment of PF is 15th of the next month. So, in case the assessee has made the payment on 16th, for example, will the assessee be allowed a deduction of the same if we see section 43B? In this case, section 43B, clause B states that any sum payable by the assessee as an employer by way of contribution to PF, annuity, or gratuity fund, and the same has been deposited before the due date under section 139(1), it should be allowed as a deduction. So in this case, if we go by this clause, the amount of 30,000 will not be disallowed, but should rather be allowed. Now, High Court has given decisions in favor as well as against the notion. But for us, the most important case law, that is CIT versus Gujarat State Road Development Corporation. So now in this case, the High Court said that the part of employee's contribution will only be allowed as deduction if it is paid before the due date of the specified fund, and not if it has been paid before the due date under section 139(1). So in my case, the said amount of 30,000 would be disallowed. Clause 21A deals with details of the amounts debited to the profit and loss account being in the nature of capital, personal, or advertisement expenditure. Now, all these expenditure are particularly important because no deduction is allowed for the purpose of these sections. So, if any amount has been debited to the P&L account, the same must be reported in this clause. There are more expenditure that must be reported under this clause. Firstly, expenditure incurred at clubs for as entrance fees or subscription, or for any services or facilities used, or any expenditure incurred in the nature of penalty. Now, any expenditure that has been incurred in the nature of penalty is disallowed under section 37. So accordingly, if the assessee has any such amount debited to the P&L, the same must be reported here. Moving to the next clause, which is 21B. Now 21B requires reporting in case the assessee has paid any royalty, interest, fees, or any expenditure to a non-resident, and on the same the assessee has not deducted tax, or the assessee has deducted tax but not paid the same to the government. In this case, reporting would be required. So in clause A, where the assessee has not deducted such amount, the details need to be given. While in clause B, if the assessee has deducted the amount but the same has not been credited to the government, the details need to be given. In this case, there would be a 100% disallowance of such an expenditure. Moving to the next clause, that is in case where the assessee was required to deduct TDS for any payment of any expenditure made to residents. In this case, if the assessee has not deducted tax or has deducted tax but not deposited the same before the due date of subsection 39(1), the same expenditure would be disallowed to the extent of 30%. However, if the same would be allowed in the previous year in which the assessee pays the amount of TDS required to the government. The next clause is for fringe benefits. So if the assessee has paid any fringe benefits, the same is not an allowable expenditure and must be reported here. After that is any expenditure incurred on wealth tax must be disclosed. The next clause is in case any amount has been credited on the account of being royalty fees, franchise fees, or any fees to the state government or any undertaking of the state government, the same must be disclosed. The next is in case where the assessee has paid salary to a non-resident and TDS has not been deducted on the same. Here it's going to be a 100% disallowance, and in this case the disallowance would be permanent in nature. So even if the assessee pays the required tax to the government, he will not be allowed any deduction in this respect. And the details to be given in this case would be date of payment, amount of payment, name and address of the payee. The next subclause is where the assessee has made any contribution to the PF, but the assessee has not ensured that TDS would be deducted for any payment from the fund when any payment from the fund is made, and the same would be chargeable under the head salary. So if the assessee has not made the provision for TDS, in this case, the amount would be disallowed and the said amount should also be reported under this clause. The next clause is for if the assessee. The next clause is for if the assessee has paid if the employer has paid any tax on the perquisites provided to the employee not being in the nature of monetary payment, the amount must be disclosed. Now clause C is for in case of partnership firms, LLPs, AOI or AOP or BOI. So in case where the assessee has paid any amount as interest, salary, bonus or commission or remuneration to any of his partners and the same is not admissible, the details of the same should be furnished in here. For example, in case of a partnership firm, if the interest exceeding the amount of 12% has been paid, the same should be reported here. Accordingly, if any remuneration or salary or bonus has been given to a non-working partner, which is also not admissible, which is also not an admissible expenditure, must be reported here. Next is disallowance under section 48.3 and 48.3a. So 48.3 states that the assessee shall not make any expenditure in cash in excess of 10,000 per person per day, and the limit is enhanced to 35,000 in case the payment is made to the to a person carrying on the business of flying, hiring, or leasing goods carriage. So in case the assessee has made any such deduction and such expenditure, and the expenditure is not covered under Rule 6DD, the said expenditure would be disallowed, and so the details of that particular expenditure needs to be given. Now 48.3a is where the assessee has taken deduction of any expenditure in the previous year, but the payment for the said expenditure has been made during this previous year. So for example, if I had purchased goods in AY 18-19, but payment with regard to the same goods have been made in AY 2021, in that case, if I've made payment in excess of rupees 10,000 per day to that person, then that excess amount will be my deemed income and shall be chargeable to tax, and the details of the same need to be given here. The next is provision for gratuity, provision for payment of gratuity. So any provision made for the payment of gratuity which has not been paid needs to be reported here, as the same is also not an admissible expenditure. The next is any sum paid by the assessee under section 40A9. So if the employer makes any contribution to the to a fund that is not that is a non-statutory fund, the said expenditure will not be allowable and needs to be reported in this clause. So if the employer makes any contribution to PF or ESI, which are my statutory funds, deduction is allowed. The next is requirement of disclosure of any contingent liability. Clause H is for the amount of deduction inadmissible in terms of section 14A. So this was also my point of qualification in form 3CA. So in case the assessee has income that is exempt under section 14A, any expenditure incurred to earn such income is inadmissible and needs to be reported here. And in case the assessee is not able to ascertain such expenditure, he may give a qualification or remark in his form 3CA or 3CB, as the case may be. The next is amount inadmissible under section 36(1)(3). So 36(1)(3) is where any loan has been taken for the acquisition of any asset. So the interest on the said loan is not allowed as expenditure till the asset is put to use. So till the period the asset is not put to use, the interest expenditure is not an allowable expenditure and needs to be reported in this clause. Next clause is amount of interest inadmissible under section 23 of the MSME Act. So if the assessee is required to pay any interest on late payment to an MSME, such interest expenditure is again not allowed and needs to be reported here. Here also, if there's an argument between the assessee and the auditor regarding the said amount, whether it is admissible or not, the auditor may give a remark or qualification of the same. The next is particulars of payment made to persons specified under section 48(2)(b). This requires reporting of any expenditure that is either paid or payable to the related parties. So for example, if the assessee is a company and the company has paid interest on the loan taken from its directors, the amount of interest expenditure must be reported under this clause. Similarly, if the assessee has purchased any goods from any of its sister concerns, the same shall also be reported under this clause. The next is amount deemed to be profits and gains under section 32AC, AD, AB, ABA or 33AC. So this again gives a reference to the clause 19 of the Act, where we were required to give the amounts admissible under these sections. So now if the auditor thinks that any of these amounts are not admissible as expenditure, they shall be the deemed income of the assessee and needs to be reported here. The next is any amount chargeable to tax under section 41(1). 41(1) is the section of deemed income of the assessee. So in this clause, the assessee this clause would require reporting of any expenditure that has now become my deemed income. So for example, if the assessee had taken a deduction of any expenditure and the liability in respect of that expenditure no longer exists, the said liability would be my deemed income. So, for example, if I had taken services and I had taken freight services, and I had not paid the amount to my creditor at that time, and my expenditure with respect to that freight was already allowed in that previous year. Now, if in the current year I'm not liable to pay any amount to such creditor, the entire amount of my expenditure would become deemed income. Similarly, any bad debts recovered would also be covered here, or any sale of asset that was used for scientific expenditure, and if the same was not used for business purposes, the amount specified in that section would also be my deemed income. Also, if any of my depreciable asset has been sold during the year and the sales considerations exceed my WDV, then the difference between my WDV and actual cost would also be my deemed income. In this case, Section 41 also allows me to set off any loss from such business. So any income deemed under Section 41(1), except in case where my depreciable asset is sold, would also be taxable in case the said business is closed down. So, for example, if I had a business which has now been closed down and I've recovered bad debts from the same shall be chargeable to tax to me even if the business is no longer in continuation. And so, if from that said business I have any other loss which has for which no set-off has been claimed till now, I can claim the set-off of such loss from my income of the bad debts that have been recovered. The next clause requires reporting of any sum referred under Section 43B. So the sum referred under Section 43B are allowable only on payment basis. That is what prima facie Section 43B says. However, the proviso to Section 43B says that the sum referred in Section 43B would be allowable as deduction in the previous year if the amount is not payable at the end of the previous year, but the amount has been paid before filing the return of income tax. So the amount admissible in this case would firstly be any duty or tax, any sum payable to the employee as commission or bonus, any sum payable as a contribution for any provident fund, gratuity fund, or superannuation fund, any interest payable to public financial institutions, state financial corporations, or even the specified NBFCs, or any amount payable as interest on loan to scheduled banks, as well as any payment in terms of leave encashment, or any sum paid to the railways. So now in this clause, firstly, clause A requires reporting of any of the sum referred that was not allowed as deduction in the previous year because the same was not paid. So, for example, if I had made a provision of bonus for rupees 25,000 in financial year 18-19, but the same 25,000 was not paid before filing the return, that amount of 25,000 would not have been allowable in for 18-19. So in that case, that amount would be reported under this section, stating whether such amount has been paid during the previous year or it has not. Now, clause B requires reporting of any sum referred for this previous year. So again, if I've made a provision for bonus in 1920 and the same has not been paid as on 31/3/20, but the same has been paid before the due date of section 39(1), it shall be reported in clause A. However, if it has not been paid, the same would be reported in clause B, and the same would also be added back to my income. Moving on, this also requires to ascertain whether sales tax, custom duty, or excise duty, or any other indirect tax has been passed through profit and loss account. So, in case if I have any expenditure related to GST, for example, any GST that has been ITC that has been reversed and that has been debited to my P&L account, must be reported here. The next clause 27A requires reporting of my ITC, that is the opening balance, the amount availed, the amount utilized, and the closing balance. So in this case, the auditor must reconcile the amount of the ITC existing as on 31/3/20 in my books, as well as the ITC that is that is reflected on the GST portal of the assessee. And in case in case the same amount is not reconciled, the auditor shall obtain from the assessee a representation describing the reasons for such difference. The next is particulars of any prior period expense that has been credited or debited needs to be reported in this clause. Now clause 28 is no longer required. So in this clause, reporting is no longer required because it was only up till 1st April 17. The next clause 29 is for a company that is where public is not substantially interested and the company has issued shares at exceeding the fair market value. So the company has issued shares at premium. The amounts must be reported in here. In this case, the auditor would be required to verify details of shares that have been issued during the year, as well as valuation of shares in case of unlisted shares must be verified. The next clause, that is 29A, is whether any amount is to be included as income chargeable under the head income from other sources under section 56(2)(9). So this clause requires reporting in case the assessee had received any advance for transfer of any immovable property and the said advance has now been forfeited. The advance must be reported under this clause. So the nature of income and the amount thereof must be given. The next clause 29B. The next clause 29B is where reporting is required and if there has been any amount chargeable to tax under section 56(2)(10). So 56(2)(10) states that where the assessee has received any amount without consideration in excess of 50,000, that is as in common words said, any gift. It also includes any immovable property that has been received either without consideration, and in that case the stamp duty value exceeds 50,000, or the assessee has received any immovable property for a consideration less than the stamp duty value. In case the assessee has received any such immovable property, the amount higher of 5% of the consideration or 50,000 must be chargeable to tax and must be disclosed here. Similarly, if the assessee has received any movable property without consideration, the fair market value of which exceeds 50,000 must, or has received any movable property for a consideration less than the fair market value, all these specified incomes must be reported under this clause. In case the nature of income and the amount must be reported. The next is details of any amount borrowed on hundi or any amount due thereon. The same needs to be reported under this clause. 30A is in case where the assessee is liable for transfer pricing, and if any and if any primary adjustment has been made, the details of the same needs to be disclosed. in clause 30A(b), the assessee needs to disclose whether he has incurred any expenditure during the previous year by way of interest of similar nature exceeding 1 crore rupees. The details for the said should be disclosed. Now, clause 30C has been deferred for the time being, and so no reporting is required under this clause. Moving to clause 31A. Now, 31A requires reporting in case the assessee has received any loans or deposit exceeding the amount of 20,000. So, 269 SS says that the assessee should not receive any amount of loan or deposit in excess of 20,000 by any way other than an account pay check, cash, account pay check, account pay bank draft, or any other electronic mode. But reporting in this clause would be required for any loan that has been received in excess of rupees 20,000. In this case, the assessee would be required to give the name, address, PAN number, or Aadhaar number of the lender or the depositor, the amount of loan accepted, whether the account has been squared up or not, the maximum amount outstanding in relation to that deposit or loan at any time during the previous year needs to be disclosed. Also, whether the loan was accepted by check or bank draft, and in case if it was, whether the same was an account pay check or account pay bank draft or not. 30B also refers to 269 SS, but here reporting is required if any specified sum has been received. Now, specified sum means any amount that is receivable either as advance or otherwise for transfer of property, irrespective of whether transfer of the property has taken place or not. If the amount exceeds 20,000, such amount must be reported in this clause. The next is BA. So clause BA requires reporting for any transaction in excess of rupees 2 lakhs, 2 lakhs that has been received by way of account pay check, account pay bank draft, or electronic modes or otherwise. So if, for example, the assessee has received any amount for a single transaction in excess of 2 lakh rupees, the same should be disclosed here. So in clause BA, the amount will be disclosed if the assessee receives the same through an account pay check, account pay bank draft, or through the electronic system. However, if the said amount has been received by way of cash or bank or a check not being an account pay check, the same shall be disclosed in clause BB. Clause BC is for reporting payment of any money in contravention of section 269 ST. So where any amount has been paid in excess of rupees 20,000, the same needs to be disclosed. There is no penalty as such for giving such payment. However, it is only there so that the department can take action on the receiver. So in case the assessee has paid any amount in excess of 20,000 through the specified modes, it shall be disclosed here. However, if the amount has been paid by cash or check not being an account pay check, it should be disclosed in clause BD. The next clause requires reporting in case repayment of any loan or deposit or specified advance has been made in excess of rupees 20,000. So if any loan has been repaid or deposit or advance has been repaid, the same needs to be reported under this clause. The next is clause D, which requires reporting if any payment is received for any loan or deposit or specified advance in excess of rupees 20,000. If it has been received through the specified modes, that is the electronic mode or the account pay check or bank draft, the same needs to be disclosed in clause D. However, if any payment has been received in excess of rupees 20,000 by way of cash or a check not being an account pay check, the same needs to be disclosed in clause E. Moving to the next clause, this clause requires details to be furnished of any brought forward losses or depreciation allowance. Now in this case, the auditor under the column remarks must give information about whether there has been any pending assessment or appellate proceedings that have been going on, and all such brought forward losses or depreciation allowance shall be reported in this clause. Clause 32B relates to reporting in case of a company which is where public is not substantially interested, and there has been a change in the profit sharing ratio. Now, Section 79 says that where there has been a change in the profit, where there has been a change in the shareholding pattern of the company, the brought forward loss will not be allowed to set off if the persons who were holding 51% of the voting power in the previous year when such loss was incurred are not the same persons who are holding 51% of the voting power at the end of the relevant previous year. The next requires reporting of any loss carry forward from speculation business. Clause D requires any loss from the business under Section 35 AD. And E requires any brought forward losses where the company is deemed to be carrying on the business of speculation business under Section 73. And if there has been any loss from such speculation business, that needs to be reported here. Clause 33 requires reporting of any amount admissible as deduction under Chapter 6A. So, for example, any deduction under Section 80C or 80JJAA or 80D for that matter. The next clause is very important because it requires details to be furnished if any tax that has been deducted or collected, that is TDS or TCS. So in this case, the first column requires TAN to be reported. The second is the section under which TDS is deducted or TCS is collected. The third is the nature of payment. The fourth is the total amount of receipt, the total amount of payment or receipt for the nature specified. So for example, if I have a commission expense of rupees 5 lakh debited to my P&L account, the entire amount of 5 lakh needs to be reported under column 4. Now column 5 requires the total amount on which tax was required to be deducted or collected. So if out of 5 lakh, I was only required to deduct tax on 3 lakh, the amount of 3 lakh needs to be disclosed. Column 6 is the total amount on which tax is actually deducted by assessee. If in case the amount is same, the entire 3 lakh would be reported here. And column 6 is where the amount of tax deducted or collected. The next is total amount of tax, the total amount on which tax is deducted or collected at less than the specified rate. Column 9 is for the amount of tax deducted or collected at an amount less than the specified rate. And column 10 is for the amount of tax deducted or collected but not deposited to the credit of the central government. Now question here is that if I have an expenditure of freight and I have deducted TDS at the amount at a rate lower than the specified rate, because my deductee has provided me with a lower deduction certificate, will my amount be disclosed in column 5 or would it be disclosed in column 8? So in this case, the amount would be disclosed in column 5 only, because where the assessee, where the deductee has provided me with the lower deduction certificate, the percentage stated in that certificate is my specified rate for deduction of tax. The next is details to be furnished for all the returns that have been filed. So the TAN number, the type of form, that is 24Q, 26Q or 27Q, the due date of furnishing, the date of furnishing if the return has been furnished, and whether the statement of tax deducted or collected contains all the information about details transactions which are required to be reported, and if it does not, then the list of such details or transactions must be reported. The next is reporting of any interest that has been that the assessee was liable to pay under 201A or 206C. So this is also a very important clause, because any amount that has been paid as interest on TDS is not an allowable expenditure, and so the entire amount that has been disclosed here, if it pertains to the previous year, it shall be disallowed in my income tax return. Now, a simple question here could be, as the date of payment in case of TDS is 7th of the next month. So if I have made the payment on 8th instead of 7th, for how many months would I be required to pay interest? So for how many months would I be liable to pay interest for? Yeah, so in that case, the interest would be for 2 months. That is the month in which the month in which the expenditure was incurred, and the next month. So if I was liable to pay a TDS for the month of April, and I've made the payment on 8th May, interest would be accounted for both months, April as well as May. The next clause requires details to be given only in case of a trading and the manufacturing concern. So if it is a trading business, the same would be reported in 35A, that is details of opening stock, purchases, sales, as well as closing stock and shortage or excess if any. In clause B, reporting would be required if it is a manufacturing business, and reporting shall be required in terms of all raw materials, finished goods, as well as byproducts. Now, in this case, if there is any excess or shortage in any of the three, that is finished, raw material, or byproducts, the auditor must obtain the reasons for such excess or shortage that has been there during the year. The next clause requires reporting in case the domestic company has paid dividends during the year. So the total amount distributed, the amount of reduction as referred in clause 115A. So in this case, if the company has received any dividends from its subsidiary company, the amount of said reduction would be reported. Secondly, amount of reduction referred in clause 1A2 of section 115O. Thirdly, any tax paid thereon, so the entire amount of DDT paid needs to be reported. Also, reporting of all the amounts of dividends along with the dates on which they have been paid needs to be reported. The next is reporting in case any amount has been received as dividend under clause 222E. So here it is very difficult for the auditor to ascertain whether any amount received is in the nature of section 222E. And for example, if the auditor does not have access to the records of the company from which such amount is received, the auditor may disclose this fact as a remark or qualification in his form 3CA or 3CB, as the case may be. And details of such amount must be given. The next three clauses, that is 37, 38, and 39, are with regard to any audit that is carried on, that is cost audit, central excise tax audit, or any sales tax audit that was carried on. Now, in this case, the auditor is required to give details of all the disqualifications or disagreements that have been reported in such audit report. The auditor is also required to comment whether the assessee is liable for such audits or not. And reporting in this clause is only required where such audit has been done for the period relevant to the previous year. So if the audit has been done for the relevant previous year, then the auditor is required to disclose such amounts in these clauses. The next is reporting of ratios. So the total turnover of the assessee is reported, then the gross profit ratio, net profit ratio, stock in trade, and material consumed upon finished goods produced should be reported. In this case, in case of a trading or a service, in case of a trading or service business, reporting of the fifth ratio is would not be required. And for the purpose of this clause, stock in trade shall only mean finished goods, but the material consumed should include all the raw material consumed as well as stores and spares or tools consumed. Now, question in this regard would be the net profit for computing the net profit ratio would be before tax or after tax. In this case, the net profit to be reported would be before tax. Also, if the assessee was not required to get his books of accounts audited in the preceding previous year, no details of the preceding previous year needs to be given under this clause. So finished goods under this clause can be calculated as first you will add your raw materials, all the material consumed plus any wages or any direct expenditure attributable thereof, and the difference of the difference in the opening and the closing stock of WIP to arrive at the value of the finished goods produced. The next clause is clause 41, which requires details to be furnished of any demand raised or refund issued during the previous year in any act other than the Income Tax Act or Wealth Tax Act. So if, for example, the assessee has received any GST refund on account of, say, imported duty structure or export or any other VAT, excise, sales tax refund, any amount that has been referred during the previous year, whether such amount relates to that previous year or not, shall be reported here. 42A requires to ascertain whether the assessee is required to furnish the statement in Form 61, 61A or 61B. So 61A is Form 61A is where the SFT transactions are reported, and 61B is in case of FATCA, that is foreign account. That is foreign account tax compliance or my common reporting standards. So if the assessee is required to furnish such statements, the details must be reported. The next is whether the assessee or its parent company is required to furnish reports under alternative or the alternate reporting entity is required to furnish reports under Section 286. Now, this is only applicable to assessees where the group turnover exceeds 5,500 crores, which in case of most assessees, at least in Ahmedabad, does not. And so, if it does, the same must be reported under this clause. Now, clause 44 is the breakup of total expenditure of entities registered. This clause has again been deferred up till 31st March 21. So that was the end of all the tax audit clauses. Moving to the next part of my presentation today will be the income tax circulars. So firstly, I'll cover section 269 SU. Now, section 269 SU is for any person carrying on business. So profession itself has been ruled out. And in case his total sales, turnover or gross receipts exceed 50 crores during the immediately preceding previous year, he shall be required to provide the facilities of accepting payment through electronic modes. So this section was brought into force on 1st November. However, when it was brought into force, no prescribed modes were notified by the government. On 30th December, the government notified the specified modes, which are debit card powered by RuPay, UPI or Bheem UPI, or UPI interface quick response code. Now the government said that uh, uh, said that this section shall come into force from 1st January. However, 1 month was given for the implementation for this section. So no penalty would be no penalty would be laid on the assessee till 31st January. However, post 31st January, if from 1st Feb the assessee still does not provide the facilities of the prescribed mode, a penalty of 5,000 per day would be levied. Another clarification that was brought on 20th November was that in case the assessee is only having B2B transactions and at least 95% of the aggregate of all the amounts received in the previous year is not in cash, then the assessee would not be required to comply with section 269 SC. Now the next thing that I'm going to discuss is the changes that were brought in Form 3CD on 2nd October 20. All these changes relate to section 115BA, BAA and BAB. So firstly, that we've already discussed is insertion of clause 8A. Secondly, in part B, under the clause of depreciation, that is number 18, CA would be included, that is any adjustment made to the written down value and the said written down value. Similarly, in case of details, in case of clause 32, where details of brought forward losses were required to be reported, the additional requirement of reporting any losses allowances not allowed under section 115 BAA and amount adjusted by withdrawal or additional depreciation on account of opting for for taxation under section 115 BAA. So this is particularly in case of unabsorbed depreciation on account of additional depreciation. To conclude, I would say that you can be anything you want, and as articles, at least when we're working in our respective firms, we should work with a diligence and a view in my mind that I would be signing the same audit report or I would be certifying the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sania Jagnani ma'am. Now I request Head Gajja to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Divya.
Hello.
Hello, am I audible?
Can I ask?
Yes, audible.
Yes. I would like to thank Ms. Sania Jagnani ma'am for sharing such a valuable knowledge on the topic 44AB with relevant tax audit clauses and some recent income tax circulars. I would like to also thank CA Jignesh sir for giving us so many insight about the topic and we learned so many things. I would like to thank CA Fanil Shah sir, Chairman of Ahmedabad branch, and CA Harit Dariwal sir, Vice Chairman of Ahmedabad branch, for giving such a valuable time. I thank each and every participant of the meeting. Without you, this would not have been possible. Thank you, each and everyone.
I think Jignesh bhai, your address is left, so we would love to hear from Jignesh Parikh. Jignesh bhai, if you can please guide the participant and also other sessions in future.
Sorry, Harit sir, I won't be able to hear your voice.
Jignesh bhai, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So Jignesh bhai, you can basically brief like your views on the session and how you can help the participant and the others who will be speaking in future.
Right. So at the outset, I would like to congratulate the entire branch and the Vikasa team for carrying out this kind of wonderful or organizing this kind of wonderful programs for the benefit of the students. In this particular scenario of COVID-19, when everybody is struggling and what to do and how to proceed further, and at this point of time, Ahmedabad branch is working very hard, organizing this kind of programs, taking the best advantage of the technology. And of course, when we are working for the benefit of the students, nothing like that. So my heartiest congratulations to the entire managing committee of the Ahmedabad branch, Fanil sir, Harit sir, and the entire managing committee. Of course, entire team of the Vikasa for carrying out this entire series of programs for the benefit of the students. Now, whenever I start with any topic, generally as I start with a particular note that, you know, we get an advantage of learning when we are given an opportunity to deliver a talk. And Sania Sania has delivered a wonderful session today, and she would be probably seconding my opinion on this. That today she presented a wonderful note on tax audit, and definitely it would have definitely added to her own command or the particular topic. So of course other participants would have definitely gained, but her command and her confidence over a topic would have definitely gained, because the moment you read for a topic, the moment you write over a topic, and the moment you deliberate over a topic, of course your own understanding increases over a particular topic. So I would request each and every participant here to participate in this kind of a programs where your command over a topic would increase. You would come to know that how to present the topic, what is expected, where things are going wrong, and how can you fix it. So let me, if I be specific with respect to today's presentation, the way the topic was presented, it is presented in a very fantastic manner. She started with from the beginning, from where the tax audit came. Vanshu committee came up with the tax audit. In the Vanshu committee report in 1971, the tax audit proposals were there. They got implemented in 85, of course, because it is India, with due respect, it takes its own time. So in 85 it got implemented, and from then she started with tax audit, 44 AD provisions, 44 AD provision, ABAD interplay. And the best part that she did, according to me, was the two best things I would like to deal that she has done. First thing is she deliberated on the recent amendments which were brought in by way of notification dated 1st of October. And the second best thing that she did is she invited the participation of all the participants by raising questions. So these are the two best things you have done, according to me. One small suggestion that I have here, ma'am, for you is, whenever you present a topic, suppose had I been presenting this particular topic on tax audit, I would have, after deliberating on 44 AB, AD interplay and ADA interplay, the stuff, I would have started with the important clauses first, so that I could have deliberated more on the important clauses, because they are going to be addressed by almost all article assistants, like depreciation, like ratio analysis, like 269 SSNT, right? So I would have 43B, 41, or like the expenditure debited to P&L account. I would have focused rather on a part, and thereafter I would have invited the questions from the members, that for other clauses, if you have a question, you can come up. So of course, everybody has his own way of deliberating over a particular topic, but the way you covered, you were given a time of roughly around 1 hour and 45 minutes. And in a time of roughly around 105 minutes covering, you have covered all clauses of a tax audit report. That is a wonderful way in which you covered. So there is no second opinion on this. But you know that ABC analysis could have been applied. So next time, whenever you are given an opportunity, try this as well. So your aim should be that whenever you are deliberating on a topic, your aim should be that you should be delivering the best, and whenever a participants are hearing, they should be end up getting a lot of material from you whenever you are ending up with a session. Your PPT was fantastic. Through charts, you have explained everything so far as possible. Like when you are giving the poser, so far as possible, give the answer to that in the PPT, so that even when somebody is referring to your PPT, they get a clarity that what exactly you were trying to say post session as well, right? So only two suggestions: your PPT, if possible, should contain answer, and number two, that you should try and go by ABC analysis. The most important things are being covered first. So even if somebody is quitting the session at the middle, then also he will be getting the best out of it. So these two suggestions. Apart from that, you have done a fantastic job. Your command was good. You deliberated on each and every clauses of the tax audit report, and certainly you have set an example for the other participants. And I would request each and every participant to take the maximum possible advantage of such kind of opportunities when the opportunities are given by the branches in a different, organizing different kind of programs. Once again, I congratulate Ahmedabad branch and Vikasa, team Vikasa, for organizing such an event where articles are given their possibility, are given this opportunity to open up themselves, to present their views on a particular topic. It would certainly help you not only in your academics, but also when at a later point of time when you are appearing before the higher authorities. Of course, now we have e-assessment and e-appeals now. So more will be on a written part of it, but still they have an option of online video conferencing, or even in tribunal when you will appearing, or whenever in future you will appearing before settlement commission, or out of you whosoever completes your law and appears before the high court. Your presentation skills would definitely increase, and this is the foundation which is being set by the Ahmedabad branch. So we all should be thankful to the Ahmedabad branch, entire team of Ahmedabad branch, for organizing such an event. And once again, heartiest congratulations to you, ma'am, in person, for giving your best efforts. And indeed your presentation was good, and this would definitely be helpful to the article assistants. It would be an handy support to every article assistants in carrying out that text audit function. And the last line which you made was a really good one, where you said that you should execute text audit report in such a fashion that as if you are going to sign the text audit report. So that was a wonderful piece of message that you had given. So this is what I had from mine. Wonderful session, very good session that you have delivered, and keep it up. So that's what that I had from mine. I really enjoyed this particular session, and it is one of the rare sessions where the speaker has dealt with each and every clauses in a span of 45 minutes, in a span of 105 minutes. Technically less than 3 minutes per clause, but you have deliberated on each clause. Nobody felt that you have hurried up. Nobody felt that you have accelerated on a topic. You dealt on each and every clause. So a wonderful thing that you have done. So wish you all the best to everyone. And once again, congratulations to the branch and Vikasa team for organizing the committee. Over to you, sir.
Sir, I would like to thank you for giving all your insights on my presentation. I would definitely keep in mind all those points that you've taken, and would do a better job the next time I take a session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving your valuable guidance and valuable time. Thank you so much, Sania ma'am.